Welcome to episode 9 of the RiptideLab podcast. Today, our guest is another podcaster whose voice you may recognize, Anthony Mattox from Lucky Paper Radio. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here. Good to finally meet you face to face ish.
Yeah. Speaking of face to face, I am jealous that you and Andy live in the same town, even if that town is Baltimore.
Hey, what's wrong with Baltimore?
I don't know. Actually,
Greatest city in America.
I actually didn't want to. I didn't want to bring it down at all. I have in my notes a line that says "Sell me on Baltimore." I have no. Okay, here's what I know about Baltimore. It is like referenced in the opening of the musical Hairspray, I want to say.
Yeah. Why am I completely blanking on him? Famous film producer, is famously from Baltimore, so a lot of his work is all around here.
And Brian David Gilbert, the YouTuber, is from Baltimore, and he references it in some of his work.
And The Wire. That's mostly when I tell people I'm from Baltimore. They're like, "Oh, isn't that so? Is it actually just like The Wire?" And the answer is, yeah.
Yeah, you interact with cops all the time.
All the time, yeah.
So, beyond The Wire, sell me on Baltimore in like a 140 character tweet.
I don't have a great pitch, to be honest. I'm here because I went to school here where I met Andy a good long time ago, and we ended up sticking around just because we were trying to start a new business, which we still run today, and we just had a lot of connections here already. So I don't have a pitch for Baltimore. I'm sorry.
Okay, so you guys have like a real like business on top of the. I'm not gonna say on top of, next to the Lucky Paper stuff.
Right. Yeah. We've been like great friends and also business partners for the longest time. So yeah, we go way back and share just about everything.
That is great, and I know I come from like a kind of competitive gaming background, and I feel like there's a lot of examples of like people who grew up in the same city or even the same household who like their collaboration has like pushed them to a new level. Like there's a couple twins from Pickerington, Ohio, of all places, who dominated the Halo scene for like a decade, and I know there were brothers.
When you say a couple twins, you mean one set of twins, because first I interpreted that as like multiple sets of twins and was a little confused how that was like a phenomenon. It's it's like Pacific Rim. You have to have a twin in order to really play well.
Yeah. I mean, there were two humans who were twins. And then I saw a video of like the classic Tetris World Championship finals where two brothers met in the finals, and I think it was being played like online even, and they were like just playing from different rooms of their childhood home. I feel like, I don't know, you guys must get to like form a brain trust all the time that just like elevates things.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to peek behind the curtain a little bit. So we like, our day job is we build websites, we build applications, but when we were leaving college, we just didn't really see the jobs we wanted anywhere else. And we're like, you know what? Let's just get together. We have two other very close friends, and the four of us. It was just like definitely this great sort of creative group of people to be around.
Is four
still
like
is to this day
the key number for you? Because like Lucky Paper is also 4 people.
I think 4 is actually a difficult number. You don't have a tiebreaker, but I think if you're around the right people, any number can work.
Okay. So the origins of Lucky Paper is you and Andy having a friendship in college, and then you brought in Jet and Parker at some point aboard.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the origins are, we've been playing Magic, honestly, not that long, I feel like, compared to a lot of people. I think about 5 years at this point.
Okay.
And as we've sort of gotten more and more into it, it's become a bigger and bigger part of our lives. This idea of like, we should be doing more like creative stuff and like have this Magic media empire. But then it really started when Andy found a few of Jet, one of our other contributors, articles online that he was posting to Reddit or somewhere like that. And what we do is we put things online, we can make them beautiful. So he sort of reached out and just said, hey, how about rather than posting this on Reddit, let's combine forces and like take all this like really interesting like data statistics heavy writing you're doing and give it a more permanent home. And then I was sort of a little bit involved at the beginning, and then obviously I've gotten a lot more involved since Andy and I started the podcast together.
Yeah, and I feel like I asked Parker about how he got involved, and then probably just like cut him off mid-story. I'd have to watch that again, but if you could explain how he got, so that's Land of Mordor to those of you listening.
Yeah, I mean, same thing. Andy's just sort of been on a mission to like find the people that are producing interesting content that doesn't have a home yet, and bring these people together.
Okay, well, I think you guys have a cool site. It looks beautiful. It makes a lot of sense that you guys make websites professionally. It makes me feel a bit better about my dinky little like WordPress homepage. But so
I mean, there's nothing wrong with a dinky WordPress page. Like, there are all these tools that work well. Like, we're using Squarespace, and like obviously social media platforms like Reddit work great. It's just sort of like the way that we operate. We can't imagine not like doing it our own way. And what it does allow us to do, obviously, is then we can do a lot of custom stuff. So when we want to make a survey, we're not just beholden to using like whatever open source survey tools are. We can actually spend the time making a custom thing that really is specific to our use case to make it as easy as possible for people to use. And same with like the cube map and other things we've been working on.
Yeah, I feel in general like a little bit intimidated by like the level of polish of the things you guys put out, because like I don't know, I film a video, I edit it, and I put it online usually like within like a 24-hour time frame while also having a baby. How do you have like the patience to like wait till things are perfect?
Patience is a really strange word to use. I think it's more of just like anxiety to not be able to put things out there until they are.
Yeah. So we were talking about what are we going to talk about on this podcast, and one of the topics that came up in the Cube Talk Discord at some point was this idea of a video for first time cubers and what you put into it. And the video, a couple screenshots were posted, and they were very I guess the word would be like prescriptive, like very like formulaic. You should run this many monocolor cards, this many gold cards, this many whatever, and that is their approach to teaching people how to build a cube. What are your thoughts on it if you had to make one of these videos?
Yeah, and we've definitely touched on that a little bit on Lucky Paper Radio. But I definitely agree. Those sort of introductions that have that really specific structure are, to me, a little bit too formulaic and maybe not focusing on what's important. At the same time, I think it really depends on sort of like what is the problem you're trying to solve in the context of trying to help someone with their first cube. And if the problem you're trying to solve is they have too much decision paralysis, they don't know where to go, how to start, then having a pretty rigid structure can actually help sort of alleviate some of that and answer some high level questions about just like, or take away some of that anxiety of, am I doing it wrong if I put this many blue cards and this many green cards or whatever. But I think for a lot of people, that can also just be a hang up, because in the end, if you have one more blue card than green card, that's not really going to negatively impact the draft experience at all.
Right.
So I always just want to encourage people to just start, just get a pile of cards together. Draft is self-correcting, and whatever the optimal strategy is, let your players find it, and try not to worry too much about that structure.
Yeah, I do quite like the shoebox approach, and it is how I started cubing. Was that a friend of mine here in Antwerp, he was complaining to me about having just like this horribly disorganized collection, and I was pretty new to Magic at the time, and I said, "Hey, I'll put in some time helping you organize it." And basically all I did was pull cards from his collection that I thought looked interesting and write them down on a piece of paper as cards that I borrowed from him, and that became my first cube.
Mhm.
And it was terrible. I made a video a while back where James and I grid drafted that first list, and it's all the like awful, super bomby stuff. There's no way to end the
Mhm.
game quickly, so it just turns into like who draws more 7 drops. Um, which that's a pretty like I feel like you'll learn that that's bad by playing it.
Yeah.
But I also feel like maybe I've been doing it so long that I don't have like a good perspective on someone approaching the format for the
Right.
first time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's another thing that I definitely would want to impress upon anybody starting to cube is that playtesting is super important, and any questions you have that we can try and sort of suss out and analyze just by looking at the list, we can't really do that in any degree that is going to be as successful as just playtesting it and seeing how it plays out. I think a lot of cube designers or people when they're starting to make their first cube, they have this idea that they're just going to put this list together and it's going to be perfect. They're going to put the cube in a box and it's done and everyone's going to have a great time with it. So the other thing I always try and impress upon people is be willing to iterate and test it. Get it
Mm-hmm.
together, put in whatever sparks joy, and then be willing to sort of, as you play it, make changes and improve it from there.
Have you ever tried to like design a board game or card game from scratch?
So I actually did do a little bit of game design, less board and card games, but some video game design
Okay.
as part of my college experience. And yeah, that's definitely a big part of what appeals to me about Cube is actually not just playing Magic, but getting to think about how Magic is designed. So even before playing Cube, I definitely listened to a lot of Mark Rosewater's podcast, Drive to Work, where
Mm-hmm.
he sort of gets into the nitty gritty of like, why did we make these choices we did in the set? How did we like do the play testing and iterate? And as soon as I started playing or thinking about designing my own cube, that's immediately I went back to was like, okay, let me take all those lessons that I've had from previous experiences in game design and everything I've learned from Mark Rosewater there and apply that to designing a cube.
Yeah. I have like a box behind me that is like filled with various prototypes of games that I've tried, and my experience has generally been that you spend a lot of time like thinking of some concept. You have to make all the like cards and everything, even if it's like rudimentary. You have to like put something on paper for someone to play with, and then the first time you play it, you realize like 20 things are terrible about it that you hadn't anticipated. Um, and probably that's true in a way. If you're trying to build a cube from scratch, but I guess any cube we build is kind of like sitting on top of this structure of Magic the Gathering. Like they've already hashed out all the games and rule systems. All the cards have been through R&D, even if we might consider them mistakes a little bit. So there's only so much that you can fail while building a cube.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, when we talk about, Cube is kind of like game design, it is, a fraction, a tiny percent of what people that are actually inside the building that are designing Magic from designing new sets are doing. And yeah, that's so much leverage. It's still going to be a game. You don't have to really teach people how to play Magic again, probably. So yeah, it is game design to a degree, but you're totally right that it is not the same thing as designing something from scratch.
Yeah, I also think that like um part of the uh reason that sometimes there's a lot of conflict in the cube community is that probably everyone's cube is fun, and if there are people telling you that you're doing it wrong or something, like you know that you had your cube on the table and there were smiles all around, um but there's an XKCD comic that I think of when I think about this, where it's like people stuck in a box with a bunch of pictures of Al Gore eating a sandwich, and they've been stuck in the box long enough that they start to become like very opinionated about which of those pictures are good and which of those pictures are terrible. And probably to an outside perspective, it can look like that when there's like squabbles in the cube community.
Yeah, it's also you're totally right that everybody is a little bit in their own space and focusing on what's exciting to them. But I think that that comes from the fact that Cube is, by sort of definition, a fractured experience. It's not like we're playing modern or legacy or standard, and the goals are very obvious and shared. Like we all want to win, we want to build the best deck, solve this puzzle of what are the best decks. With
Mm-hmm.
Cube, everyone has different goals, and so I think that's what is both appealing about it, but what is the sort of like root of all the challenges of having like a community and discussions about it.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you, like, how do you feel differences in your kind of like your brain when you play your own cube versus any other Magic set?
Oh, 100%. It's where do you even start about that? I mean, I think in just like the most obvious level is just like when I am playing a normal Magic set, if I'm going to go draft some Strixhaven, I'm trying to win. I'm trying to optimize my play patterns. I'm trying to, learn and solve that puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm playing my cube or watching other people play their cube, I'm trying to do that as well. I'm trying to make my best effort to, win and play optimally. But also, I can't help but also like be the designer as well, and both take great satisfaction in seeing when things are working, when people are finding fun interactions and things like that. Which just is unfortunate that not everyone can be the cube designer, right? Because I feel like that just makes the experience so much more rewarding, that even when I'm losing, I get to learn about the whole mechanics of how the cube is working.
Mm-hmm. I feel like um I played Strixhaven probably like 15 drafts or something.
Mm-hmm.
Uh and never once really thought about how to improve it. I think it's
Right.
an amazing set. And probably the designers, now that it's been out in the wild, themselves have some thoughts about how they could change it. I played the Arena Cube 3 times, and my brain was like flooded with a million different things I would change about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Um,
funny. Even so, just like having that idea of like, oh, cubes are mutable things that we can iterate upon is like baked into you. So even though there's not that much difference in clicking the cube button in Arena versus clicking the Strixhaven button, you're in that mental space already.
yeah, I also think it's that
It's actually just worse than Strixhaven.
I honestly feel that the quality control that goes into making their actual draftable sets
Mm-hmm.
is not attempted to be applied to Cube. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I felt like when I played multicolor greedy control in that cube that everything was pretty easy and forgiving, and that when I tried to play aggro, I felt just miserable. And
Yeah.
I made the mistake of I went in Discord while I was like 4-1 in my first arena cube draft playing 4 color control, and I said I'm actually having a much better time at this than I thought I would. I don't know if it's that I'm not playing against Dom Harvey like I normally do when I play my cube, but this is this is good fun. And they said, yeah, it's good fun if you don't try to play aggro. And then
Sure.
I took that personally and I drafted aggro twice in a row on purpose and had. I felt like I needed so much more to go my way to win a game than. And one of the games I had like a good 3 color mana base for a slow deck, and it was just so clunky for an aggro deck that I ended up changing my deck to be monocolor, which I feel like
Hmm.
I never have to do in my own cube, but like and I don't really feel like I ever have to do that in their sets either. Like when I play Strixhaven, I never think, oh, I need to shift to mono black in order to win some matches.
Oh yeah, I mean, the idea that the Arena Cube would have the level of playtesting that an actual set has is obviously ridiculous. Like it's the Arena Cube is they I'm sure of a small group of people that are working on it, but they're not doing this like aggressive playtesting. They're not spending literally 2 years on it as a set.
Yeah,
I think that cube, I'm very glad it's there. It's like a much more public place that cube, which is the best way to play Magic, and everyone should be aware of it, is put into a much more visible place. So I'm really excited that the Arena Cube is there, but
hmm,
it is in a really challenging spot in terms of what their goals are. Because the typical like legacy and vintage cubes, obviously the idea is we want to play Magic, we want to do a draft, but instead of there being all these bad cards, what if all the cards were good? And that's like an exciting hook. There are all the cards there to build it. But
yeah,
then when they're going to the arena cube, like people still have those expectations about we're going to see these certain kinds of decks. All the cards are going to be powerful. It's going to be exciting, except there are just aren't enough cards on arena to actually create that experience. So I think if you wanted to create the arena cube that, like you're saying, comparing it to the limited formats that has that rigor and has that depth to it,
yeah,
you would just have to drop the power level down in order to actually just have access to enough cards that are of an even enough power level to be a balanced set. But then you wouldn't be giving people that experience of like expect to find the best cards here, and people would be extremely disappointed with that. So the
yeah.
result is just kind of like some good cards, some bad cards, and it's kind of a pile.
I had to put in my deck I took every one drop I could find. I ended up with three of them, and one of
Oh,
them was a 1/1 that deals one damage to the opponent when it attacks. Uh,
yeah, Scorch Spitter.
that might be it. I did not allow my brain to remember the name. Um, I feel like I'm stealing from a future podcast because I have a plan to talk with Andy Mangold at some point about lessons learned uh, from Smash Brothers. Have you played
Mm-hmm.
any Smash games?
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Okay. I feel like uh the Wizards produced cubes are like playing Smash with items on. Like
Okay,
it's
full disclosure, I do kind of like playing Smash with items on because
see
I'm not that great at it, and I need a little bit more variance injected into it for me to have any chance. And you just pick up a beam sword and have a good time rather than having to know all those complicated moves every character
yeah,
has.
and I don't think there's anything wrong with playing with items on. I spent a lot of my preteen years playing Smash with items on and loved it. And then at a certain point, decided I wanted to play no items, Final Destination, everything that gets memed on for competitive Smash. That's what I got drawn to. And uh in Smash there was always like this kind of like big rift between the like casual and competitive
Mm-hmm.
community. And probably when I hang out in a very items off corner of the cube world or of the magic world. Whereas like if you're designing a cube to like be like a fun, just kind of fun outlet for your usual arena MTGO grinders, maybe you want items on. And the goals behind that are probably uh much different than the goals that I have, where like cube is my kind of only format, my serious format. And it's possible that they don't even want aggro to be good. Like it's not the most it's not always the most like rewarding gameplay for everyone if they're like spending an entry fee.
Right. And people are looking for something unique. They've been playing Strixhaven. They want to do something different that's big and splashy. Doing something different that's just more aggro. I think it's just not what most people are looking for.
Yeah, if you've already been like curving out playing Silver Quill or whatever,
Right.
then I mean, sure you can curve out with slightly better cards, but that's probably not the expectation that lives in a lot of people's heads at this point.
Yeah. I love this item metaphor. I feel like this was actually an axis that I was trying to describe the other day when comparing it, like what Andy and I enjoy about the game. I feel like, yeah, like maybe Andy's cube, this like really sort of fine-tuned, fair strategy cube is like complete items off battlefield. So that's the level battlefield.
It's one of the levels. It's one of the competitive levels. Yeah.
And then over here on the other end is like Brian Sanderson's Commander Cube, where it has these like custom regalia cards, and you get the, what are they called? The like hero cards that are just these like powerful effects that you
The
just get to start the
Vanguard
game with,
cards,
and
or
conspiracies.
yeah,
It's like got all kinds of stuff going on, and wacky things are happening every turn. And I'm probably like 10% along that axis, where I'm not like a complete like all items off, but I like a couple items, sprinkle in a little novelty here or there.
yeah. You want Pokeballs on medium occurrence or something.
Maybe 5%.
But
More like a maybe some food, some beam swords,
yeah,
plasma
okay.
cannon.
Yeah, you tuned in while I was like at the end of streaming some a sudden death cube that I found
Mm-hmm.
on Reddit, and I wanted to make a video about this cube, but I feel like the changes that I made to it, which I didn't expect to be that significant, completely butchered the format in a way that was not um, fair to the cube. For those of you who don't know, it's like I think it's like a 54 card cube, micro cube, meant to be grid drafted, and you build 15 card decks and you start at 1 life. Uh, but we played it on,
Exactly what the name sounds like.
yeah, we played it on MTGO where the minimum deck size is 30, and it turns out doubling your deck size from something very small to something medium introduces so much more variance in your draws and in how your mana plays out that like so many of my games were kind of ruined by mana screw or mana flood that I don't think would have happened in a 15 card format.
Yeah, I feel like in a sudden death draft, you kind of need to have everything work out. You can't afford to stumble.
Yeah. And there was a phrase because there were some games that were really good, and they were definitely like a it felt like a puzzle in a way
Mm-hmm.
that I feel like normal games of Magic have a bit more like freedom of expression to them. And the phrase I used was that it felt cerebral but not joyful. And you told me that this was a phrase that you were looking for
Oh
to
no.
describe an Andy Mangold cube.
Yeah, you're going to get me in trouble. I feel like that is exactly the fact that it is cerebral is exactly how I would describe his degenerate microcube, where like every game feels like a puzzle. You have to keep every piece of information, like what cards are in your opponent's deck, what's in their graveyard, what could be in their hand, how many times are they going to be able to recycle their graveyard with their elixir of immortality before you draw an answer to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's very little wiggle room, so you can't sort of. That's one of the things that I honestly just love about playing limited. It's like a lot of it comes down to statistics, and you're like, well, I'm going to make this choice because I think I'm more likely to draw card A than card B, and if I draw card A, it lines up better.
Mhm.
And if it doesn't work out, you can sort of blame it on the randomness of what you draw, and having some flexibility, just and like the giving the player agency to make choices and see if they pan out or not, rather than just the answer is here. Can you solve the puzzle given complete information?
Yeah. Um I'm gonna make a confession.
Hmm.
and I want you to give an honest answer if you can. Um, I feel like I hope every game that I play that my opponent just gets mana screwed and never casts any spells. Like there's something in me that like is always just saying like I'll play a 2-drop and I'll say just let me attack with this 2-drop 7 times and the game will be over. Do you have that like in you somewhere, or is that something like wrong with my
I think we
personality?
all have that a little bit. I mean, it's a game, we want to win, but it feels a lot better when you win a fair fight. And when your opponent just gets mana screwed, that really doesn't feel like a fair fight. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's still a win.
I know it's not like obviously if like every game ended with someone being mana screwed, probably we wouldn't play Magic. The the fact that there are good games where everything lines up, like that's what like gets us into it. But I still
Mhm.
have like I don't know, I have that hope, I have that like thought in my head every
But here's
time
the
I
thing.
play.
Here's the way you justify it is you don't say, oh, you just got unlucky, you got mana screwed, and you lost the game. You can say, well, you designed your deck to have too greedy a splash, your curve is too high. You've put yourself in the situation to risk those number of non-games, whereas I have decided to play plenty of lands and 2-drops and will consistently be able to play a game.
What do you feel about people who they lose their game and then you're just waiting for the complaint about mana screw, mana flood. There's they'll say that the MTGO shuffler hates them.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, everybody gets a little salty sometimes. I definitely try to keep that under control and learn from my mistakes. But yeah, if you're in the situation where you have an opponent that you know when they lose, you're expecting it to come. That's not where you want to be as a player.
Yeah, there's to get back to Smash. There's a phrase in the Smash community. There was a guy named John who complained all the time. He always made up excuses for why he lost. Like the sun was in his eyes, his B button was sticky, there was glare on the screen. You know, always something. It was never his fault. And eventually, his friend group started saying "No Johns" anytime someone would complain, and this caught on like nationally. And 15 years later, is still a phrase that people say in the Smash scene.
Or John.
Yeah, imagine being immortalized in that way. Um, what what we need to do is find a famous cube complainer, and I'm afraid that it might be me, but we need more phrases that reflect the community.
Yeah, I think again that's challenging because it is a community, but not in the same way that other Magic communities are, because we're all
Yeah,
playing differently and we don't have these like high profile events where we can say like, yep, here's this cube person who gets salty every time they lose. And frankly, like a lot of the discussion, what the community is there for is not to talk about cube gameplay. It's mostly to talk about the design of cubes
yeah.
because yeah, the gameplay experience is just not shared.
If there was a phrase, no Anthony's, what would it mean?
I don't know, like just be trying to be too clever about keeping up your Whitmane lion or something.
Okay. Is that something that you're known for?
I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of things
Why
that
do
I'm
you
known
even have
for.
Whitmane Lions? What cubes are you playing with Whitmane Lion?
Oh, all of them. I look for like I play cube to play Whitmane lion.
Okay. I see a cube by you called the
Okay,
Black
it's not in the
Cube,
black cube. It's not in the black
the
cube.
Turbo Cube,
It's not in the turbo cube. It wouldn't
the
make a lot of sense there.
multiplayer cube.
It might be in the multiplayer cube.
We're gonna find out.
Oh.
Uh-oh. Mm, I'm
Probably
not seeing
not.
it.
No. Damn.
All right. Well, I'll give you a
Well, but
pass.
Whitmane lion's just an example. I play cube to enable playing cards that I enjoy, and I have been designing many cubes because there are a lot of different cards that I enjoy.
Yeah, I love your cube primers. I've been looking through them. Tell the world about your Turbo Cube.
So just for a little bit of context, like I have the one cube, my regular cube, which is actually like pretty thoroughly designed. I've put a lot of effort into it, and we play it as often as we can and iterate on it. A lot of these other cubes are more just theoretical. So we've gotten in a few reps virtually with the turbo cube, and it's evolved a little bit. I have behind me a box where I'm actually starting to gather some paper cards to start building these in paper, but these aren't quite as refined. But the Turbo Cube started because there was an arena event where I think it was during Korea, they said, do a turbo draft. And you drafted against bots, and there was a stipulation that all effects costed, I think, 5 less to cast. And it was just this like really interesting puzzle to say, let's draft this format, but because we have this emblem, the card evaluations changed completely.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to take that to Cube and see what would happen. And I decided to go for a 2 mana reduction rather than 5, just because I felt like it opened up a lot more space for, cards to actually be meaningfully changed. Whereas just like the outcome is basically just that if you say everything costs 2 less to cast, the 3 drops, which are now 1 drops, are incredibly more powerful than anything else, or 2 drops that are free, because cutting the mana cost of a spell in a third is so much bigger than if you have a 4 drop, cutting it in half.
Right.
So saying, okay, we'll give you a discount of 2, it's like enough to be meaningful, but there are a lot of 3 drops in Magic that are going to now just like play in a completely different way. And this was also just a little bit of a joke. Like I talk a lot about how, Magic is a game where all the decisions, all the numbers, they're arbitrary, they're made up. People really gravitate towards more powerful cards for a lot of good reasons. But also I think when you're designing your own cube, it's a self-contained system. So saying like more powerful cards are better for cube is kind of nonsensical in a way, as far as like the actual gameplay experience, because the only thing that matters is the power level within the cube, the way the cards are related to each other.
Right.
So this was also, starting from that turbo experience that was on Arena, and then me thinking, well, like if people want to play with more powerful cards, like if they actually think that a Moxen is more fun, if I think I say in there the Arkham's Astrolabe is actually more fun than a Prophetic Prism. What's even more fun? A 0 mana Prophetic Prism.
Yeah.
And it turned out it actually is a lot of fun. This cube lets you take a lot of game actions every turn, and taking game actions is fun.
Yeah, I think in that way it's probably got something in common with the Pokemon TCG, which I played for the first time like as an adult like a year ago, and I described it as like the budget vintage you didn't know existed. Like a lot of the standard effects in that game are just like 0 mana Wheel of Fortunes that you just like, like you can like see so much of your deck on like turn 1 and do so many actions. And probably this is like the Magic equivalent of that sort of thing, where you can, I imagine, like go off turn 1 sometimes.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit difficult. If you draft against the bots on Cube Cobra, which is how a lot of people experience their cubes, they'll just pass you. They don't know that Shadow Blood Egg is the most powerful card, or Guild Globe is the most powerful card in this format. So you will get that 14th pick. But even with human drafts, which we've done a couple of, you can still get pretty potent decks. Cycling is a cool ability that's free, and there are a lot of these cheap artifacts that draw cards at the end of the battlefield. So you can easily, build a 40-card deck with 4 lands in it, and you draw your hand and say, well, I don't have a land, but I have every one of these cards I can effectively cycle. So let's start and see if we end up being able to do it.
And you also have like land cycling cards in there.
Yeah, so the land cycling, one of the really fun things that emerges from this is just, again, like learning about game design, learning about how the game functions, and seeing how when we twist it, when we break it in one way, how do things change. And all these things that have like plane cycling, or cycling for 2 different land types, those are just like fetch lands, and we can have this experience in this totally sideways way.
How did you get into cubing?
So definitely through Andy. My path through Magic, I think, which is not too uncommon, is we started playing, casual kitchen table decks. Someone suggested we try Commander. We got very deep into Commander, built lots of Commander decks, And then I really got turned towards limited when I started realizing, well, the commander gameplay isn't that interesting to me, actually. Like, it's a great social event. I love the building of the decks. But when we sit down, it's just like, I play my creatures, you board wipe. Okay, I play my creatures again, you board wipe again. And it's like,
Hmm.
there were, at least in the commander group I was in, it wasn't feeling like I was learning and growing as a player and making meaningful decisions in the game. So that's when I really started. I was introduced to limited and got really into limited because it afforded that. Um, and what do you do after that? Well, like this synthesis in my mind of what's great about Commander, like being able to play with any card in the history of Magic, and make anything viable, but also be sort of a spike and um, grow as a player and make meaningful decisions. Put those together, and you have Cube.
Hmm.
And then just more concretely, Andy decided to build a cube, I think inspired from some of LSV's videos, and sort of as a foil to his, which is initially was sort of a more traditional vintage cube or legacy cube, decided to build a much lower powered cube, which could just highlight a different range of effects and strategies.
Yeah. I will admit to not being a big fan of Commander, and at some point I was an
So many confessions.
yeah. At some point I was even less of a fan of people at the local game shop always asking me to play Commander. And I would say I don't have a Commander deck, and they say it's no problem. You can borrow one of my decks. Um, and I really wanted to do this. I never did it. It's probably an awful thing to do, but I had dreams of building a deck full of like packs and Final Fortune types of effects, and just being like, okay, yeah, I'll play with you. Sit down and try to lose the game legally
I
as quickly as possible. It's kind of like a performance art.
love it.
Yeah. And I just wish I always like had that ready to go anytime I got that question, until I realized that the amount of time it might take until you get to your second turn in Commander could still be like a 20-minute investment in a
That's definitely
multiplayer
true.
game. Um, and I hope no one takes offense to this. I don't judge anyone for playing Commander, for enjoying it. I I have always had a bit of uh difficulty with multiplayer games that have very active king making,
Hmm.
where the politics and like trying to be ahead without appearing that you're ahead. And I remember that in my local shop, at least, everyone had like these kind of unwritten rules for how they wanted other people to play Commander, that like every game seemed to end with people getting upset and leaving the building. That they had
Yeah.
invested all this time, and then someone broke some unwritten social contract, and uh, I yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this rant. I'm probably like actively losing subscribers with each second that I continue talking. Um,
No, I mean, I think that's a recognized and understood problem with multiplayer formats, that everyone sort of has to play in a sort of de-optimized way in order for everyone to have a good time. Which, if you have a group of people that is on the same page as you, is a ton of fun. Like, I'd still enjoy the occasional sit down, have a couple beers, play some Commander. Um, but yeah, if people are trying to optimize the game, it sort of degenerates into these play patterns that are just really not fun. Which again, like the solution, as far as I'm concerned, is play cube. And if you like the multiplayer environment, but you also want to be like trying to play in an optimal way,
mhm.
a multiplayer cube, I think is just a lot more satisfying than a commander game.
Yeah, I was having a call a couple weeks ago with Andy, and I brought up the game Munchkin. Do you know Munchkin?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I had so much fun in college playing Munchkin with three other friends, because we all had like a communal social contract to not try to play the game optimally.
Right. Sit there with all your gain a level cards and wait for the first person to try and cross the finish line. Let everybody waste their reactive effects on that player and then snipe them.
Yeah, we played that you would start trying to screw people over from turn one of the game and just kind of try to make as like creative of deals and game states and things as possible. And the game itself, if you would imagine just like playing it online without friends and without this social contract
Oh my goodness.
is not something you would probably get satisfaction out of for long. So I can see that, you know, I can't sit here and say I enjoyed Munchkin and try to like high horse my way above Commander. Not at all. But I guess I got into cubing. Like I started out as a standard player,
Hmm.
and um, I just moved to Belgium. I didn't have like a lot of spare money for like investing in magic cards, and I had kind of like scraped together a viable deck, and then rotation was coming up, and I knew I didn't really have it in me to just like continually be trying to scrape together a viable deck, and cube really appealed to me as like an escape from that cycle and a chance to like I don't know play with a card that I liked even though I didn't have the entire like rest of the shell that is needed for it in a constructed setting.
Totally. I mean, at the risk of this just turning into the 2 dozen reasons why Cube is the best format ever podcast, that's entirely true. Like that is really at the core of what Cube does for me and why it's so exciting. That if I'm going to go play Commander, if I'm going to go play Standard, I really need to have the best cards to like have a good time because I don't want to just sit there and like play my guild gate when my opponent has shock lands and just lose every time. That's not going to be a satisfying experience. But if I'm playing Cube and I just put in guild gates over shocklands and everybody's playing with the same like bad mana base, we're all still playing the same game. And so I think it actually is entirely feasible to like depower any aspect of it. And yeah, just have a fun experience on a budget.
Yeah. Um you you seem to be very excited about Cube. You are on a Cube podcast. Um I feel like our format's not very popular.
Huh. I think that's a problem we can work on.
How do we work on it?
It does have a lot of challenges because like we've been saying it's not one format. Like we can talk about drafting the Magic Online Vintage and Legacy cubes, and those are like the things that get the most visibility. But it's still like it's very hard to have a like community excitement around this thing that is by definition somewhat fractured. It's also challenging because it is a tremendous effort. Like it's enough effort already to build a commander deck, which is a third of the typical size of a cube. So the like barrier to entry to actually start designing cubes is extremely challenging. And then I think there's also an issue of just what are the actual goals. Like if I'm building a commander deck, I think one of the things that the commander itself does for the format is it gives you sort of a baked in goal. You see like here's name your favorite commander, Virals. Like okay, now I want to find I assume that's your favorite commander. Slash,
Yeah,
that's the first legendary creature I could think of.
I love
Um,
scavenging.
I want to dig back through the history of Magic for every creature that I can get into the graveyard as quickly as possible with the most powers that I can scavenge.
Yeah.
Or what I was trying to recall was the one that doubles counters, Varel. Then you want to say, okay, well, let me look through the whole history of Magic and find every card that interacts with counters that I can double the counters on to try and win the game in a fun way.
Yeah.
Cube doesn't necessarily have that like the commander is such a good thing for getting people excited and drawing people into the format because it provides that really useful structure. So like that not having that kind of hook really makes it hard to get people excited about cube. And
Well,
then additionally there not being any like professional parallel to it, like this idea of if I keep playing standard I can rank up and I can like compete with the top level players. We don't, and I don't think we will have that kind of experience
with Cube.
with cube.
Well, I mean,
So that wasn't an answer to your question. I'm just saying it's going to be hard.
yeah. I mean, in theory, the people could graduate to designing actual games,
Mhm.
which is a big leap. I have like a game I worked on for a while that is like it's play tested pretty well. But the thought of like actually like going through the effort of like getting it good enough that I would be happy to publish it and
Mhm.
like figuring out how to even publish a board game is so daunting that for now I'm just making mediocre YouTube content because it's much more accessible. But all right, I want to. How do we make Cube more popular?
Uh, okay. I think you just keep making what are definitely not mediocre, but quite high quality YouTube videos. I think you got to just keep building the excitement, introducing people to it, explaining why it's great. I do think that, for the same reason that I largely moved on from Commander, I don't think I'm alone in that experience of like wanting to be able to play with a whole history of Magic and play these archetypes which don't fit in 60 card formats, but also want to move a little bit away from that multiplayer experience or the like intentionally depowered experience. And I think that just making Cube available and being welcoming to people, I think is going to slowly have the format grow over time.
All right, I'm gonna pitch something to you
Okay.
because you are part of this like Lucky Paper Brain Trust, and it's kind of like a big picture idea. I don't know how feasible it is. To give you another Smash background for context. So as you know, we have been in a pandemic,
I heard
and
about that. Yeah.
yeah, there's a game called Melee, which it's the second Smash game. It came out in I want to say 2003. So it kind of it predates online play. Uh, During the pandemic, some guy quit his job and implemented netcode for the game that is like better than most modern games online netcode. Like you can now play Melee online with like basically no detectable lag, and they have now tournaments using this like homebrewed netcode that's been adopted by the whole community with actual money on the line, and people like recognize it as a legitimate test of skill because the net play is so well implemented and it's so easy to play people online now.
Yeah.
So I'm
I mean, first of all, that's an amazing I hadn't heard about that. That's incredible that you could like actually just hack the game apart and make it work.
yeah, the melee people are like crazy like dedicated to
Yeah.
improving their game because they don't get any support from Nintendo, so they kind of do it all
Mhm.
themselves. I have like an idea which I do not have the technical skills to do of some like cube hub for like quickly launching and playing cubes, and the biggest tackle to it would be one it would need to be on MTGO because that's where the cards are available online. um you would need some like secure way of loaning out cards quickly, and that's been solved by people in the community. There are card rental programs that you can pay for currently. Like there's the card hoarder program where you can pay a monthly rate and then you get whatever. And then that there would be some kind of like central portal for launching your own cubes, and maybe there would have to be some like small like some way to like incentivize you to play other people's cubes and not just have like everyone like launching their own things, and like some central thing where you want to play cube, you're in a match drafting like within a minute or two. Like if there was some like coded infrastructure in that way that I think one we could play each other's cubes quickly without like a lot of the cube discussion is so like abstract because we never play each other's cubes. Um, and if you have some like cool idea that you have fleshed out in your design, like you can just let people experience that rather than like making some vague video article podcast about it and having it kind of like maybe trickle into people's brains in that way. Um, I don't know. I don't think this will happen, but I would be very happy if somewhere in the future it would happen. And I bring it to you guys because you guys have like these surveys, the cube map. You have a lot of like technical skills by your side. It's maybe not even in your interest. You guys do paper magic on your stream. But I wanted to know like what you thought about like possible futures for Cube and avenues for making it more accessible, making it possible for people to get their cubes played more, etc.
Yeah, you're totally right that the lack of a digital platform is another huge barrier. The fact that like you can kind of do it through Magic Online, but there's all these extra hurdles. It does add a lot more friction. But like you say, I think that one thing that I've realized during this last year of not being able to play paper magic really is that the gathering is such an important, like that's obviously very cliche to say, but
Mm-hmm.
being with people and actually like being in the same room and talking about my deck with people, like that is so much of what brings me to the game. And without that, I'm not saying I wouldn't play Magic without that, but no, I might be saying that. Like, there's so many things that are great about the game, but that social aspect is a keystone.
Yeah,
Um, and we sort of in our play group did our best to try and come up with online solutions to keep playing Cube in some format. But even if we're playing the games, it doesn't have the same feeling.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I recognize that for a lot of players, that could be a key piece. But at the same time, and I think it's maybe more of a key piece in terms of like visibility and giving people a chance who don't have access to a local play group to play. But for me, the future of Cube is definitely still in paper because that's what I love.
Sure. When is LuckyPaperCon?
Great question. Whenever, all the time.
All the
Come on
time.
down, come on over to Baltimore.
Yeah, I sometimes like I know there was like a planned
Hmm.
CubeCon that I guess got canceled.
Yeah.
Um, I wasn't really like around when all that went down, but I guess if I imagine doing it like with my website, I would imagine just like renting a house and having like 10 to 16 people around to just like play each other's cubes and do that sort of stuff. I can film interviews of community members because I don't know. I like seeing Andy, like kind of like learning who the people in our community are, and um, yeah, there's not a lot of like contact outside of like people's immediate play groups.
Totally. Yeah, I'd be really excited to see more. Like you mentioned, CubeCon. It was really sad to see that not happen, along with everything else that didn't happen in the last year. But I think there are plans to give that another go, and if it ends up happening, I will definitely be delighted to go to that.
Yeah. Beyond you and Andy, like what does your local play group look like?
So this was actually just the subject of the last episode. I believe the last episode of Lucky Paper Radio was talking about sort of how to find a play group or build a play group and what our own experience is
Oh,
like.
the how
And for
to win
me,
friends and
mhm.
influence people. Okay, yeah.
um, and the reality is, like, again, I would not be playing Magic if it wasn't for this play group. We were sort of playing a little bit. We built some kitchen table decks, but really, once we found this play group, it was when I like really fell into the game. So yeah, I mean, Andy was definitely the one that started this sort of cube enthusiasm, but it has grown, and I think just about everyone has at least one cube in paper at this point, and so
How many
pre
how many are you in your group?
We'd probably have, 8 to 10 people that are, the regulars who will
Uh-huh.
pretty much will show up to any cube related events, but a broader sort of group of people that'll be there occasionally, or will meet up at the local game store.
Yeah. Yeah, when
For a long
I
time, actually, for years, the our office actually was where the play group would meet, just because we had extra space. It was not being used after hours, so we just said, hey, people have sort of been gathering at coffee shops and things like that. What if we just make a regular weekly meetup and just all play Magic at our office? And we would have every week 20 people, sometimes a lot more.
wow.
And that ended up sort of morphing into our local game store, because some of the members of that group realized, well, we have this market, this captive interest. Can we actually just turn this into a shop? And it's great. It's a good shop.
Oh, so the shop did not exist already.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh wow. Wow. Yeah, when I did paper cubing, I played in a local shop here, and we had like a rotating cast of like 50 people, and
Oh
just
wow.
different people would be available week to week. Um but yeah, it's playing in a like the shops here are just kind of like hangouts who will spend dozens of hours. Like there's computers
Mhm.
there, there's you can get food and drinks there. Like there's kind of it's a social hub for uh cardboard and digital loving people. But I guess the downside to playing in your office is that anyone who's not invited would not encounter it.
Yeah, there was definitely a social media effort, but yeah, it was a lot of word of mouth of people learning about it.
Okay.
So having a consistent place that's open all the time and people can Google it and show up if they're outside of the group is definitely a huge asset to bringing more people into the game.
Yeah, that's probably more accessible than people showing up to
Totally.
your closed office.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. What's the? Are you comfortable like giving a glimpse behind the curtain into like the future of Lucky Paper?
Sure. We have a long list of GitHub issues to get through. Um, Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of projects that we have sort of on the horizon. The cube map has been a big thing. These surveys are the perspective surveys, where we sort of ask everyone to share what cards in the news set they're interested in, and then we compile that into a big graph of what are the top cards, most contentious cards, all this kind of stuff. All these things are going to continue to grow. As people continue to make more cubes on Cube Cobra, the performance of the cube map gets worse and worse. And one of these days, I'm going to have to do a lot of work to make that keep working. I don't
Yeah.
know that there's a lot that is like we have sort of plans for expanding the cube map potentially into other formats and just using that same technology to try and reveal interesting patterns in other formats.
You mean
But
like
beyond
Battle
that, it's
Box or
going to
something like
be
that?
Commander is actually what we've been looking at. I hope that's not giving
E-
away any secrets. That might be giving away too much of a secret, but I
well,
apologize.
okay. I'll let you in on something. Like we're like an hour into this, so like
Mhm.
probably like three people are gonna make it to this point in the YouTube video, anyways. So hopefully they don't. Oh, Seeker says nobody heard that, so
Perfect.
it's been confirmed. What you said has not been heard. So you guys, you're gonna take over all of Magic, is what I'm hearing.
I wouldn't say that. I mean, we've been doing a lot of these little projects, but I think that not trying to do everything is definitely part of at least my philosophy in like building software abstractly and building things. Like I'm much more interested in making things that you can get information into and out of, that can integrate with Cube Cobra. If we're building something else that works with decks, making sure you can get that content in and out, and just does the one thing well, doesn't try to be the whole ecosystem. But yeah, we're gonna try and take over all of Magic for sure.
Yeah. All right. A final request that Parker said I had to ask you is for a recipe.
that's mortifying. I don't have recall for these kinds of things. What kind of recipe are you looking for?
I don't know. What are you known for? Why would Parker tell me to ask you? You must have some reputation for recipe creation.
It's possible. It comes up now and again on Lucky Paper Radio. Andy and I are both very much food people. We love to cook. We love to eat. I have a specific interest in Sichuan cuisine, which is, to be transparent, not something that I'm like super eager to be giving away recipes, because like you don't need people don't need a mediocre white dude telling them how to cook Chinese food, but it is like something I really really love and am passionate about. So I could give you a recipe for twice cooked pork just because it's on my mind because I cooked it last night.
Yeah.
All right, twice cooked pork is very easy. You're going to start with some pork belly. You're going to boil it, which sounds weird if you're, in modern cuisine. Boiling meat sounds a little bit weird.
Is this the first cooking?
This is the first cooking.
Okay.
For about 15-20 minutes until it's cooked through. Take it out of the water, put it in the fridge for an hour, a couple hours until it gets cool.
Yeah.
Then you can slice it very thinly against the grain. And then you basically stir fry that. So you take these slices of pork, you stir fry them in a pan, and then you add, I'm gonna just give you the source. Go ahead and look at Fuchsia Dunlop's, what is it? The original book was called Land of Plenty. I believe it's called The Food of Sichuan is the new edition.
Okay.
So go there for the specifics, but you stir fry it with chili bean paste and this Chinese sauce called sweet wheaten paste, fermented black beans, and then you add a bunch of leeks or scallions or some other greens and stir fry that all together, and it is delicious.
All right.
It's extremely spicy and salty and rich and fatty.
How do I adapt this recipe for my vegetarian wife?
There are so many other great recipes. This one is all pork.
All right. Well, thank you, Anthony, for coming on the show. You've been a wonderful guest, and I will see you around. I'll see you on Discord.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Yep. Thank you everyone for watching. Bye.